Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jake, this is Nerd Level Rising. Today's video is something that, I don't know, I've been thinking about a little bit. I got a chance to talk about this on a couple other channels recently when I did Dear Dr. Fantasy with Philip Chase. I got to talk about this a bit there on his channel, and then also a bit on Beast Friends Forever with Chris, the Bearded Book Beast. I got to talk about it with him as well a little bit more recently, and it's just been, I don't know, there's something about the new year that has me thinking about like beginnings and stuff like that I'm just kind of nostalgic, and I don't know. So I've just been thinking about this too anyway, and like, let me just make a video about this so it's just kind of out there on my channel as well. So this is going to be like formative series for me, formative books for me as a kid. I think that the things that were formative for me as an adult were a bit different because I had kind of a weird break there in the middle, as I'll talk about. But this is just some stories that mean a lot to me and that really shaped me as a very young person, right? And as a young reader. So let me get into it. The first one on this list is A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. These are so fun. I actually reread these as an adult when the Netflix series was coming out, and with Neil Patrick Harris, and who is just an unbelievable Count Olaf, by the way. But this is such a fun series. I remember that the thing I remember most about these that really means a lot to me is my dad read these to me before bed as a kid. And that's a very special memory to me. I have the best parents in the world, right? And I love them dearly. I'm so far away from them now. I'm down here way in Florida, and they're way up in the Midwest. I don't get to see them. I get to see them maybe, once every year and a half or something like that. But it's a very special memory to me. It was my dad reading to me as a kid. And I think that played a big part in me becoming such a big reader, right? Was him reading these stories to me, and then also seeing my mom reading. My dad doesn't read books, right? It's just not his thing, but he would always read these to us before bed, and then I saw my mom reading all the time. She read a lot of like Stephen King and stuff like that. So I think that was huge, right? That's step one, right? Was seeing all that. So these books will always be very special to me. We didn't finish them as a kid, right? I think we got through maybe book 7 or 8, I think, before we kind of, I don't know, we just started doing started reading other things or whatever. And or eventually that day does end when your dad no longer reads to you before bed. So I can't really actually remember if that was what ended it or if we just started reading other things. I think it might have been that, actually. But anyway, so when the Netflix series was coming out, I went back, not just reread these, but also finished the series. And it was super satisfying, right? These are for kids, right? But even as an adult, I really appreciated the story, and it was really great. So yeah. There's number 1. Okay, hopefully I don't almost cry again. Number 2 is Artemis Fowl. This is one of the first things that I picked up on my own. I distinctly remember being in like 3rd grade reading these, and there was just something about all the characters in here was just so cool. Artemis being like the kid super genius, right? Who was kind of like, I was always conflicted as a kid. Is he a good guy or a bad guy? Like, I don't know, or like the bodyguard, and I don't even remember some of the characters' names. The dwarf Mulch? Is that his name? There was so much just cool sci-fi, whatever stuff. I didn't even know it was sci-fi at the time. It was just a fun story. But I really, really liked these. I haven't finished the series. I read the first 3 I read a handful of times, and then I kind of fell off of them, and then when I was a little bit older, I saw that there was a 4th book out, and I was like, whoa, well, let me check that out, right? And then that was kind of it. And now I sit back and realize that there's 8 of them, and the series is complete, and I'm like, man, I should go back and read those sometime, right? So that could be fun. I'm kind of scared because I don't want to tarnish this memory if I go back and I'm like, I don't know. But I am interested in going back and revisiting and finishing that series. That could be really fun. And there's something about these book covers too that I just really, really like. I wish they still made them like this, right? I looked up the series somewhat recently, and the cover art is just very different. And just not really my personal style, but nonetheless, Artemis Fowl, super, super fun sci-fi story as a kid. The third one I don't actually have with me. I must have left it at my parents' house when I moved down here, but that was the Chronicles of Narnia. Like most people, this is a really early series that they pick up. I remember reading these in grade school. We had this I don't even remember what it was called, but it was that, I'm sure people know what I'm talking about, right? If you're a similar age group to me, at least you probably do. There was these books that you would read it, and then you would take this online quiz about, like your reading comprehension or whatever, and you'd get a certain number of points based on how long the book was, how difficult the book was, and at the end of the year, whoever had the most points, won a prize or whatever, right? So I remember reading them for that. And that was fun. That would be another one that would be interesting to revisit, because I don't remember a ton about it. I remember some of it, but not a ton of the details. And so that could be a fun one. But that was a good intro into fantasy, and also sort of like Portal fantasy, right? But also seeing some of these deeper meanings, right? Because that it's a little bit more on the nose, I think, in Narnia. And I'll never forget, further up and further in, right? I feel like that's a quote that is just really stuck in my head. I don't even remember how young I was when I read that, but it's just always there. So that's it's a story that could be fun to go back. I mean, you could, I feel like you could read one of those a day probably, right? At this point, they're pretty short books. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong, but anyway, Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. It was always a fun one to go through. The next one is actually the only manga on this list, and that is Yu-Gi-Oh! Right? So people, if you watch the channel, I love Yu-Gi-Oh! Right? I've been rewatching the show. I've seen it probably, 4 times, 5 times. I don't know. I've seen it a bunch. I still have all my cards. I really miss playing the game. I grew up playing it so much. I love it dearly, especially old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Right? And nowadays with the winning in the first turn thing, it's just not as, I don't know. I miss the OG days. But this was the first manga I ever read. This was the sort of my gateway into that, right? And my gateway in just that whole medium of manga and manga / comics, right, as a whole. My first, seeing pictures alongside the text, right? And this is very different from the show, by the way, right? At least it starts off very different. And this is... I don't know, man. I have such good memories about this because we used to always get the monthly Shonen Jump like compilation things, and I started just getting the Yu-Gi-Oh! Ones because that was always my favorite, and then I fell off of them. That's a pattern for me as a kid, right? I just would fall off of series eventually. So this is one. I have these first 2 3-in-1 volumes, and I would love to get the rest of them because I would love to actually sit down and read the entire manga series and be able to pick out all those differences between that and the anime, right? Like I've seen some of them in these first 6 volumes, and it'd be fun to have the whole thing on my shelf because I love that. I'm a completionist nowadays, at least, not as a kid, obviously. But yeah, that'd be super fun. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Very special place in my heart. Then still, right? It's just a story that's very special to me. As basic as it sounds, it did teach me a lot about friendship and just everything that goes along with that, and sticking up for your friends and trusting your friends and leaning on people when you need them and all that kind of stuff. And also just how much fun I had with the card game. My brother and I played it constantly growing up, and I have a lot of really, really great memories of that. So very special series to me that opened up the whole world of manga, and to a degree got me much more into anime as a kid also as well. So there's that one. Next, traditional fantasy intro. That is the Drizzt books. I talked about this a little bit in my Drizzt video that I made a while back, that as a kid I picked up some random of these. I think Crystal Shard might have been the first one, I can't remember, which was it's a good place to start, right? That's a great starting, I would argue the ideal starting point for the series. But then I remember grabbing just like random, I grabbed like Thousand Orcs and Spine of the World and like just random, because I didn't understand the concept of a series at the time, right? I didn't get it. So I would just read like a random book. I didn't understand anything that was going on in there, but I remember just these cool characters and these cool action scenes, and that was enough for me to keep me interested in Drizzt. And then, as an adult, I still remembered it constantly, and I was like, I should go back and actually read those in order and see what the story is all about, right? And it's even so much better than I remembered it being as a kid. So these were awesome. This has also been my gateway, not just into like very traditional classical fantasy, but also into D&D, right? This is one of the very early things when I found out that this was a D&D story, right? It's right there on the side. I was like, oh, what's that? And you start, you get on Google and type in that and you learn all this stuff, and now I play a D&D, right? So it's just been such a cool thing that was really instrumental in a couple of ways for me. And another one that I revisited, and it's another theme for me here, I guess, in this video, that was great. Super fun. I really enjoyed this. I had little slippery patch there in the middle, as I've talked about in that Drizzt video, but I am now back on Team Drizzt, and I love it, and I can't wait to continue the series. I get the Sellswords trilogy next. That's going to be the next one that I do at some point. Not sure when, but I will get to it before long because I'm excited. I'm excited. So we got that. Now we're kind of getting up into, I'm a little bit older now. I can actually understand what a story is at this point. I'm in like 5th grade, somewhere in there. So I had 2 things that came up then that I think were huge for me. One being his Dark Materials, starting with The Golden Compass. This is by Philip Pullman, and this was a story that I just kind of saw what you could do with different magic systems, right? I think that's what I take away from this is, you see, a lot of the stories that I'm doing, like Narnia was softer, more wonder, more awe. You're doing like Drizzt that like, it's a wizard casting a spell or whatever, right? You see some things like that. This, like the alethiometer, the knife, I won't talk about it, in much depth. I'll leave it, just kind of there for spoiler reasons. But this is just a really unique kind of magic system, at least that I had seen up until that point, and it got into some really, really interesting things with like the daemons and just man, it was just very different from what I had read before, and it really opened my eyes to like, whoa, like there's a massive variety of stuff that you can like. This is so polar opposite to the Drizzt books, and so that was really cool. It was a trilogy that like this was the first thing I remember knowing that it was a series with a finite number of books, and then I read those books and I knew it was a complete story, and I knew it wasn't complete until I read all 3 in order. That like this was one of the first times I remember thinking that and being like, wow, like how cool is that, right? It's I don't know, that just I don't know. It was just so cool. And it's another one that I reread. It's probably been 10 years since I reread it, but I got so much more out of it the second time. Who would have thought you don't understand everything that's happening when you're a 5th grader? That now I just appreciate the story as a whole even more. The bear, how cool is the bear, right? There's just the witches. There's a lot. There's a lot of really cool stuff. So this is one that I would love to go back and read the Book of Dust books that he's doing now, and just kind of get back in that world. That'd be super fun. So the Golden Compass especially is one that really sticks out to me. I read this one, I think, a couple more times compared to the other books in the series. So that was a great one for me as well. And then the other one that you guys knew had to come, right? Somebody my age range, we all grabbed Aragon. This is one of the first ones that I remember grabbing off of the library shelf in my grade school with nobody recommending it to me, nobody telling me, hey, you might like this. I didn't see it on a list somewhere. I didn't see it, nothing, right? It's purely, I saw the title and the cover and read the thing on the back. This is beat up because this is literally the copy, right? Like this is, I got it from the library. I was like, oh, this is cool. I was a very slow reader at the time, right? So my mom bought me this copy so that I wouldn't have to keep rechecking it out. And so this is what I read, right? And you can tell that it was, thrown in my backpack and stuff. But Aragon was so just, I don't know, man. Like it just opened up a whole world, to see dragons, right? Like this is like my first, or one of my first times at least, reading about a dragon. Certainly my first Dragon Rider books. And then also you get all that, right? You get all of the coolness of the story. Obviously now as an adult, and I can look at this and I can say, wow, like this was very heavily inspired by certain other things, which I don't think is bad at all, right? Just to be clear, I don't think that's bad at all. The rest of the series goes off and really does its own thing. It's sort of like Empire of Silence was to Dune, right? Like it's very heavily inspired, but then goes off and does its thing. This was kind of doing that with some of these other older books. I didn't know that at the time. To me, I thought it was this wholly original, amazing thing. But so it set me off on liking those things. It set me off, like so many other people, that just now I think dragons are the coolest thing ever. And I think also this planted the seed in my head that I want to try to write a book, right? I remember being in 5th grade, 6th grade, and having these ideas of like, how can I write a book younger than Paolini did it, right? How can I beat him? And obviously I didn't do that, right? But I remember having these ideas and thinking about it and thinking about, well, how could the series go? And what's like the general idea in each of the books. And I never did anything with it, but that idea was planted in my brain, and to now be, working on a book, right? Slowly, very slowly, but it's something that I am legitimately working on. That dream, that thought has never left ever since then. So I'm always grateful to this story for that. Next, this is one I never see anybody talk about. Pendragon. I never see anybody talk about this, but I fell in love with this series. This was one that I remember getting in trouble in class because we'd have, so I don't know if you'd have like a little break right in the middle of class. You're in whatever, 6th grade, 7th grade, whatever. And so I'd grab my book and I would start reading a little bit. And then the next thing I knew, the teacher was yelling at me. He's like, "Hey, pay attention." And I was like, "What?" Right? Like I just didn't know, but I was so sucked into the story, I didn't realize class had restarted, right? So I thought we were still on break, and I was just getting my few pages in. Next thing I know, I'm just getting yelled at. So I'll always remember that. But this was such a amazing journey, right? A 10-book series, right? This is a long series, and this was sort of a sci-fi fantasy blend. This was my first time with that. This was my first time really following this character who was kind of a similar age to me at the time. And, I was going through and he was kind of dealing with some of the social things that I was also. And so I related to him in that way. I thought some of the characters were so cool. I thought Saint Dane was so cool and so creepy. I loved how each book went to a different world and we were seeing these very separate things happening, right? But then as the series go on, we start to see these crossovers and we start to see people from other planets are showing up. And we start to see this convergence that's happening, and it was just such a fun journey. I loved it. I would love to reread this. I think that would be super fun to go back and reread these books. And yeah, man, these were just. I loved the format of how it was sort of like his friends back on the home world were reading his journal entries that he was teleporting back to them, right? So they're sort of seeing these things in hindsight. And then we were following their journey on Earth and like sort of what they're like. It's so interesting, man. It's such a cool format for a story. Highly recommend this. This was instrumental to me seeing a big world and a lot of characters and the interaction and how satisfying a convergence can be, and that sci-fi fantasy blend that I've come to love so much. Like just a lot, right? So Pendragon was awesome. I really should make time to go back and reread these because you can probably rip through these so fast, right? Like these sort of like more YA books tend to read so fast. Okay, and then the last one, everybody knows this is on the list for me, right? Harry Potter is everything to me, okay? I have Hogwarts Castle tattooed on my arm. This is the thing, right? This is the story that I was so scared of the movies, right? So I was very similar in age to Harry as the movies were coming out. And so I remember the first movie came out and I was scared to death. And the second movie came out, I loved it, but I'm scared to death. Third movie came out, loved it, so scared. Constant nightmares about everything, right? I can't describe the extent of my fear from these movies, okay? I could not go outside if it was nighttime, even if there was people with me. I did not want to go outside. My bedroom was upstairs, right? I'm going up the stairs. If the light is off, I can't do it. I need somebody there with me. I could barely sleep, man. I like literally almost every single night, nightmares. I couldn't, it was so hard. It was so hard to deal with. And it didn't help that I was a similar age to Harry. I kind of looked like him, right? My hair was a similar length. It was kind of messy. I had glasses. Like people were telling me all the time that I looked like him. And so that made it even more so that I identified even more. And it was so hard. And the fourth movie came out, and that was the worst one by far. I was so petrified, man, petrified. And I was like, dude, I can't do this anymore. I gotta try to conquer this fear. So, but I still loved the story. Is the funny thing. I still loved the movie so much, despite them being so scary. So I was like, let me try to read these books and see what happens, right? So after the fourth movie came out, I grabbed the first book and I read it and I loved it, man. I just fell in love with the writing style and just everything. And then I just ripped through all the books that were available at the time. I think the first 5 were available at the time, I believe. And then, I had to wait for book 6. And then I had to, wait for book 7. But by the time that I read book 5, my fear was so much less, right? So much less. And I went back and, I reread them and I kept watching the movies over and over, and my fear kept getting less and less. And eventually, you look up and I'd conquered the fear, right? And that that process just made such a profound impact on me that this story will always be in my heart, man. Always. And I've gone back and reread the book so many times. I got into this cycle as I kind of end this part of my reading journey as a kid, that I would get into the cycle where I would read Sorcerer's Stone, go through, finish all the books that were either available at the time or that were, once we got Deathly Hallows, I'd read all 7, and then I'd start over in book 1 and just go back through, and then start over in book 1 and go back through. And I did that probably 3-4 times in a row, 5 times, I don't even know, a bunch of times in a row, before I finally kind of got kicked out of that cycle by an adult fantasy series. That maybe that would be a fun part 2 to this video, as I sort of finish describing my reading journey. But yeah, man, Harry Potter was, forever will be, easily make the argument that it is the most special story to me in my lifetime. I think that's probably the case. So, but there you have it, man. I don't even know how many books that is, 7, 8, 10, I don't know. Some of those really formative stories for me that opened a lot of doors, opened my eyes, opened my world, my experience, my goals in some ways, right? There's so much there. So, yeah, it's been fun. It's been a fun ride. Down here in the comments, talk to me about what were some formative things for you, right? What did you grow up reading? What do you feel made a really big impact on you, especially as a kid? I think that's so interesting. I think you can sort of learn a lot about people and how they get formed in some ways by the stories that we read. So if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, talk to me in the comments, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.